Return to the Moon, Why Americans Can't Repeat the Moon Landing in Half a Century. And the latest for today. On January 8 of this year, the American spacecraft once again failed to land on the Moon. For this reason, the U.S. space agency NASA decided to postpone around the Moon and landing on the Moon missions, moving them to 2025-26. But what's surprising is that they still want to assure us that 55 years ago, the landing of American astronauts on the Moon went off without a hitch. They even brought a four-wheeled lunar rover, planted a flag, and took pictures. A remarkable paradox arises. Half a century ago, American technologies were orders of magnitude more advanced than they are now, but alas, all of them have been lost. NASA somehow misplaced them, the blueprints are lost or burned, and the engines of the Saturn V, supposedly repeatedly carrying astronauts to the Moon, inexplicably ceased production. Only the outer shell remains in the museum, and for half a century, the Moon is once again unreachable. And after all this, how can one believe in the successful landing of Americans on the Moon? Alexander Petrov delved into this still heated topic.
After entering orbit on January 9, the American spacecraft Peregrine took a photo that confirmed specialists' worst fears.
The image shows damage to the insulation, causing fuel leakage on the lunar module.
Technical problems arose just 8 hours after the launch of the next-generation Vulcan rocket as part of the Artemis missions. As a result, the spacecraft failed to land, making the first attempt in half a century by the U.S. to return to the Moon deemed a failure. Skeptics immediately raised the question, why were there no problems with a manned landing 55 years ago? And now even an unmanned module can't land.
Cosmologist Andrei Kananin explains,
it cannot be said that back then everything went smoothly. No, there was an accident during the launch of Apollo 1, resulting in the death of 3 astronauts. The Apollo 13 mission was almost aborted, and movies were even made about it. So, there were breakdowns, malfunctions, and things of this nature. Overall, the implementation of that mission took about 10 years from the time John F. Kennedy declared that the Americans' goal was to land on the Moon by the end of the 1960s. The official start of the Artemis program was in 2017. So, 7 years have passed. It cannot be said that there is a delay in the schedule, but everything is progressing more slowly.
However, there are inevitable questions.
The main one is, what is hindering Americans from repeating the path they have already taken? After the unsuccessful launch of the Peregrine module, NASA announced that they would postpone the scheduled manned landing on the Moon from 2025 to 2026. The Super Heavy Starship rocket was supposed to send Americans to the Earth's satellite. However, its developer, SpaceX, conducted only 2 test flights, both of which ended in explosions. This sounds like a sensation, considering that half a century ago, U.S. rockets easily carried astronauts to the Moon.
They had another failed mission, and another 2-year delay in the Moon mission. Something else even arises. Excuse me, Musk is trying now. He's a good guy. He's trying to do something. This spacecraft weighs 45 tons. But they had a rocket that carried 140 tons. Why is Musk bothering with this new rocket when you allegedly have an old one?
That's the thing, they allegedly have. But was there a rocket at all? For some inexplicable reason, after successful moonshots, the powerful Saturn V rocket that carried astronauts to the Earth's satellite suddenly ended up in a museum and was never used again. At the same time, as NASA claims, all the items related to the technology of its production were lost, and over 700 boxes of technical documentation, containing descriptions of about 3 million units and parts of the Moon rocket, mysteriously disappeared. Lost? Disappeared?
Is that even possible?
Okay, they landed a man. But you should have kept on landing unmanned probes. They had their own carrier rockets that were able to launch 10 tons. Well, they would have kept on launching. They just stopped the entire Moon program.
Indeed, literally 3 years after the United States declared victory in the moon race, the program was hastily shut down. After 11 seemingly successful launches, the powerful F-1 engines disappeared.
Employees of the design bureau and the chief designer of the rocket, Werner von Braun, were dismissed. All of this gave rise to a lot of speculation that NASA was actually dissatisfied with the results of the lunar mission.
The thing is, if you look at those powerful F-1 engines, supposedly the most powerful in the world, it turns out that their actual thrust was about 8 or 9 times less. And if you watch amateur videos shot without editing in one continuous shot, you can see that the rocket rises to a height of approximately 15 to 17 kilometers, then descends down in a parabolic trajectory. So, the Saturns couldn't even enter low Earth orbit, let alone reach the moon.
This version sounds astonishing, but it somehow explains why Americans easily parted ways with a supposedly successful program that confirmed their global leadership in space.
According to the official version, they did it to save money.
The Apollo program cost $25 billion, although the Vietnam War cost 7 times more.
And for the new Artemis program, Washington has already spent several times more, with still no results.
It gives the impression that now U.S. space technologies are much less developed than half a century ago when astronauts comfortably traveled to the moon.
Is that even possible?
Honestly speaking, nothing fundamentally new has been invented. In principle, the Artemis program is an improvement over the Constellation program. In other words, the technologies are largely the same as those in the 1960s, except that now, of course, electronics are on a completely different level. So, in principle, it cannot be said that this is a scientific or technological breakthrough.
Then arises a quite reasonable question. Why, with similar technologies in the 1960s, were the United States successfully sending astronauts to the moon, and now they can't?
I think that technologies have been developing rapidly in recent years. And in principle, there cannot be a situation where the technologies for a successful moon landing are lost. The thing is, in those years, half a century ago, in the late 60s, Americans didn't plan to go to the moon. They were simply developing Hollywood technologies for shooting convincing moon landing footage in studios.
It's not by chance that there are so many inconsistencies in the American moon missions. The flag waving in space for an unclear reason, overly sharp footprints on the lunar surface, and the strange jumps of the astronauts. The footage of Neil Armstrong's historic landing also raises questions. More and more people are convinced that the pictures of the astronauts on the moon were actually taken on Earth in one of the Hollywood studios.
Even the Google's neural network confirmed this, analyzing images of the American moon landings and concluding that it's a fake.
These findings were presented to Vladimir Putin at the end of November, during an exhibition as part of the Journey into the World of Artificial Intelligence conference.
Here, their neural network marks in red the spots it considers to be fakes. In other words, almost all objects in this photo seem unreal. At the same time, the photo of the Chinese lunar rover doesn't raise any questions.
Is this what seems unreal?
Yes.
And if we stick to this version, then other problems that Americans are currently facing in trying to return to the moon don't seem strange. NASA reports deficiencies in the life support system. The landing module is still not ready, and the necessary spacesuits are not available. The agency's press release states that safety of the crew is the project's top priority. Allegedly, this factor is the reason for the postponement of the American landing.
In the next decades, it is absolutely unrealistic to land people on the moon. It's possible to send them to the moon, but the technology for their safe return has not yet been developed.
So, does it mean that Americans have never been to the moon?
Well, of course not. They had nothing. If the rocket only reached 17 kilometers, how could they have reached the moon?
The failures of the new space mission are explained by NASA's administrator, Bill Nelson, in this way.
We are returning to the moon in a way we never have before.
But why return to the moon in a new way?
Perhaps because there has never been an old way to reach the Earth's satellite.
Alexander Petrov, Vladimir Machukin, Analytical Program Postscriptum.
I'll say one thing. If we assume that the United States did go to the moon more than 50 years ago, then they showed us the only case in human history of regressive technological development. From better to worse. All other technologies have always developed progressively, except, as it turns out, American space technology. How to explain this remarkable paradox? Decide for yourselves.